Welcome back to Crude Awakenings. Today, our guest is Lewis Teal, a certified professional geologist with over 40 years of industry experience. In this episode, we discuss critical minerals, China, why permitting is the industry's real enemy, and where gold goes next. This episode is brought to you by the Oil and Gas Asset Clearinghouse. It's time for Crude Awakenings.
Well, I'm excited about today's discussion, and today our guest is Lewis Teal, who actually has the distinct misfortune of being my very first boss as a geologist when I graduated from grad school.
Oh, wow.
But Lewis has spent his whole career in minerals, both precious minerals and commodity minerals with some of the very largest mining companies on the planet, and is especially knowledgeable about what it takes to extract minerals, how to do it on a global basis, and how to actually compete with China. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to have someone who has feet on the ground skills rather than just talking about it. One of my favorite sayings lately has been, you don't learn how to farm with a pencil. And I think, everybody talks about mining, and you certainly don't learn how to mine with a microphone or mine with a pencil. So finding somebody that has real tailings dirt under the fingernails is a treat for us.
Well, what's great about these podcasts and these meetings, Lewis, is I get to learn about things I didn't even know I wanted to learn about, and so this is definitely one of those topics. Like, okay, yeah, this is great. That's part of the major benefit of being friends with Alan is getting to learn about these things. So I'm really excited about hearing about that part of the geology world.
Looking forward to telling the story.
Well, thanks for joining us, Lou. And why don't we start off with just giving us just a quick rundown of your career and how you got interested in geology in the first place.
Well, I was born in El Paso and spent a lot of time as a kid roaming the Franklin Mountains, and just picked up a natural curiosity for minerals and rocks and so forth. When I was very young, but I still remember my dad, he was a conductor for Southern Pacific Railroad, making the run between El Paso and Lordsburg, or sometimes El Paso to Tucson. And but on the side, he did a number of things, but on the side, he really got into, in the early days, in the late 50s, early 60s, into the uranium boom, and had staked some claims, had a Geiger counter and the whole thing and so forth. And so that kind of sparked, even as a kid, an interest in, what's all the excitement about, sort of thing. And it carried over. I got my degree in geology, both a undergraduate and then a master's degree in economic geology at UTEP. And first job out of the chute was actually I spent about a half a year working as in the Permian Basin, working as a well logger. And went back to graduate school certainly after that, realizing that it was I didn't know I could put up with 24-hour shifts. We were working 24-hour shifts, logging, and so went back to graduate school. First thing out of the block was during the energy crisis in the late 70s. And so uranium was a big thing, and I ended up working and this time, at that time, there were a lot of the major oil companies who had been engaged and moved into the mineral sector. And I went to work for Phillips 66, their minerals division, in exploring for uranium. And at that time, Albuquerque was kind of the center of all of that activity through the Western U.S. A lot of companies there, and that's kind of what got me into it. Of course, the uranium boom crashed, and I transitioned into precious metals and worked with a number of companies. Probably at the time, one of the older companies, St. Joe Minerals, who was quite successful in the exploration business, was up in the Black Hills in South Dakota, involved in a discovery there, gold discovery there, and on to Newmont Mining Corporation in the 1980s, and worked 28 years with Newmont through the Western U.S. and into Nevada. Spent a lot of time on one of their major gold mining operations in Nevada, in the Carlin Trend, and then moved into the international sector in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and ended up in South America on another major operation that they had, and then eventually director of exploration and early stage development for Newmont in South America and the Caribbean. So involved in a number of opportunities that became mines, discoveries. So that's where I met my wife, Rita, who's a geologist and actually now a geostatistician. She does a lot of geostatistical work, and we have a consulting partnership here out of Albuquerque, and we do quite a bit of work for as consultants for different clients. So that's kind of a mouthful in a short period of time, but it gives you a sense for the background. A lot of time I spent internationally, and a lot in South America and Central America, but also Saudi Arabia, looking for gold and involved in big gold development projects there. Most people don't realize that aspect about Saudi Arabia.
So they have gold rather than just black
yes,
gold?
They have quite a bit. In fact, the original historic mines dating back to Abraham's time and thousands of years ago were in the Precambrian belt in Saudi Arabia. So I spent a lot of time there with the work that we did for them, and Sweden, northern Sweden, as well. So I looked at systems there as they compare to what I'd seen in the Western Hemisphere. So it's been an interesting career.
It sounds like you've seen a whole lot everywhere. From a regulatory point of view, where's the most difficult place to look for minerals?
The most difficult challenge and there's a number of countries that kind of fall within that broader category. I think the most difficult was Haiti. We had quite a program in Haiti, looking for continuation in the the big gold mines in the Dominican Republic in Haiti. The issue came with the Haitian mining law, which was inherited from the French. So need I say anything else, Alan, about that? But the problem is, you could get exploration licenses, but at every stage there was a back and forth on negotiating what the terms were. and it so there was never a set term in terms of a deposit that became an ore body and taking it into a mine, what the tax regime would be. Most countries have a well-defined tax regime associated with mineral exploration and development and production. In Haiti, you had to negotiate at every phase so they saw what you had and then could decide on what the tax regime would be. So the better it looked, the more difficult it was in terms of tax regime. So that's something.
So it's just you just had to walk. You had to walk in blind.
In a sense, yes. But what we were looking for, most people don't know the large. Actually, it's a one of the largest deposits in the world, Pueblo Viejo, in the Dominican Republic, and it certainly brought Columbus into the Dominica. He made the several trips that he made in the discoveries of the America was all included every time the Dominican Republic. And so, when you've got a plus 30 million ounce deposit, on one side of the island arc, a lot of known occurrences in Haiti on the other. The idea is, as our partners had said when we first got in, is that no, we're not looking for a 30 million ounce, but we'll take a handful of fives and talking about 5 million ounces. And so we had quite a exhaustive exploration effort, starting with regional reconnaissance all the way through advanced drilling programs in the northern arc, northern island of or northern peninsula, I should say, of Haiti, and it was quite the experience. Interrupted by the earthquake, which was another story, and one of the highlights of my career was helping us to extract 14 geologists and technical advisors from Haiti in a short period of time after the earthquake, and that was quite the experience. All included in the whole thing with the early stage exploration in other countries.
Wow.
The challenge was.
So who did you eventually find all that gold for?
So what after I had retired from Newmont, they decided to extract themselves from Haiti, and they ended up selling their the company that was our partners at the time, EMX, which is now Elemental Royalties, and the CEO was a geologist I had worked with at Newmont, David Cole. They ended up selling the royalties to EMX and retain the mineral concessions, and have since sold those to a third party. So
So there's active mining taking place there?
Not legal. I'll leave it at that. And that's a problem in a lot of countries. With we found that same issues, and particularly in Suriname and Guyana, and not so much in French Guiana.
I did not know that the Dominican Republic had such big reserves, had such resource of gold, and that was one of the very first places that the Spaniards went to. Columbus and the Spaniards went to when they found the New World.
Absolutely.
Right? And I was thinking, what a different history there might have been had that not been gold there.
Absolutely. No, it was a major attractor and so forth. Yeah, Pueblo Viejo was the first operating mine in the Western Hemisphere. Dating back hundreds of years, and continued to grow. Barrick actually is the owner operator there now. So one of the major gold companies through their acquisitions. And actually Newmont is a junior. I say junior partner. They have 40%. Barrick has 60% of Pueblo Viejo. So.
Wow. So what simple advice would you give to whoever is running the Haitian government as to how to create a mining industry in Haiti?
Have consistent mining law, is going to be the key. We certainly had consultations with them. And the issue is really interesting. It's also wrapped into the history of Haiti, which is very interesting history. And the underlying lack of trust as it's related to the mining industry because of so much forced labor in Haiti, associated with gold mining in general, that it's been an issue for them to get to a law that will be something that people know and understand and can respect constantly. And in terms of endowment, clearly it's there. The extensions of that system along that island arc, the Dominican islands, it's just a matter of having consistent laws that allow for development.
Yeah. Talk about, cut off your nose to spite your face. That's I'm sure that that hurts them more than anybody, right? Because that's revenue to that country, to its community. So it's crazy when you hear those things, but obviously, unfortunately, not rare in internationally and in all types of different minerals, oil and gas, and whatnot. Can you go back? Yeah, can you go back and just for me, who's not a geologist, by the way, and explain, first and foremost, what exploration for gold and these minerals, what that is, what you do, how you identify it, how you test it, just what that process is, and then talk a little bit more, or as much as you'd like, about this large Black Hills, South Dakota discovery you made. Just to love to hear about that and what goes into actually exploring for gold, in the modern times.
Well, when you start to looking at it, and it's always a matter of scale when we talk about these things. So we'll take a look at it from the viewpoint of a major mining company that, like Newmont, who has retained a large exploration staff and is looking on a global scale at opportunities and so forth. So early stage, and this is outside the realm of other opportunities that come through the door in terms of prospects and existing discoveries and so forth that fall into a similar but take a different route in terms of their evaluation. When I talk specifically about exploration, you're looking at defining regional terrains, and we go by a very systematic process of terrain analysis, which incorporates acquiring as much of the public domain information as possible in terms of surface sampling, surface geochemistry, old drilling, drill hole information, geophysics, past production histories. so that you begin to build a broad folio of data in different regions of the world that then allow you to make decisions on where do we see within these regions the best opportunities. And that also will include these regions cross countries, tax regime and socio-political issues. So all of that is taken into account early on, and it's put together systematically at what we would call a regional scale for looking at regional endowments. Then from there,
so similar to oil and gas in the regional geology,
exactly,
in
in the geologic setting, the history of mining, what is the metal endowment in these regions? So let's take, for example, the Andean terrain in starting in Colombia, extending into Ecuador, through Peru, down into Chile and Argentina. That would be one terrain that we would have looked at holistically, and then began to parcel out different regions within that, acquiring as much information as we could, including about what the land status was for minerals. So at that point, you begin to focus in on particular subregions, and with the idea that you can follow up, still not necessarily having a claim or any kind of a legal holding on mineral lands, trying to drill that down. And I'm speaking just using the word drill down as a matter of understanding, starting at that point with systematic work, and then moving towards identifying particular areas, what the mineral land status was or is, and then really, it's the idea of getting you onto the playing field. Once you decide to acquire ground, whether either by concessions, by acquiring concessions, or acquiring them from the government, or from or staking them yourself, or whatever the law allows, or from a third party, you get it down to the project level. And in a lot of ways, you repeat the same process, but with more focus, a lot more in terms of geologic mapping, systematic mapping would be done to understand the specifics. Because when it comes down to, if you look and if you talk to a lot of successful exploration geologists and programs, and what I've recognized through my experience is that discoveries, as we define a discovery, we had a very specific definition of what a discovery at Newmont. But discoveries are generally made, here we come down to scale again, somewhere between the scale of 1 to 5,000 and 1 to 10,000. And or if you're talking in that's metric. If you're talking in U.S., it would be 6,000 or 12,000. But point being is that you're really down to those scales where you can define mineralization that is cohesive enough that allow you to test it. And just like in oil and gas, the ultimate test is the eye of the bit, the eye of the drill bit. So the whole effort is to use all and integrate as much of that information as possible, and particularly geology, geophysics, geochemistry, all designed as an apex towards defining drill targeting.
So Lewis, I always had a very simple definition of mining back when I pretended to be a minerals geologist, and that was how do you move the least amount of rock how do you move and crush the least amount of rock for the most amount of valuable minerals?
Good point. And it all comes down to grade. It's a grade issue.
So like the Carlin Trend was when I was in school was a big deal, because all of a sudden they were not looking for an ounce per ton, they were looking for grams per ton. But moving all this rock through, and they were able to crush and extract that in a way that they could make money, which was, frankly, that was revolutionary at the time.
It was. A lot of things kind of came together at a very interesting time. We went off the gold standard in the mid 1970s, and so that allowed the price of gold to begin to escalate quite a bit. And along with that, there was a lot of metallurgical work done. U.S. Bureau of Mines at the time, looking at extraction processes that allowed for more of a bulk mining attribute, where prior to that, it was very rare to see a gold mine, extending into like in an open pit environment where you're doing a lot of bulk mining. With the advent of cyanide leach technology in the oxide portion of the deposits, that allowed for crushing, maybe one stage crush. There you go, Alan. That's exactly what. In a case of the operations that one of the larger operations that Newmont had in Peru at Yanacocha, the oxide zones was no crush at all. It's basically you blasted it and put it on the leach pad, and just the way that the gold occurred in the oxide environments on the outer fractures allowed for it to be leached and capture the gold in leach solution that then you bring through the mill, and very simple process of extracting it and refining it. Coming back to the what you'd asked, Cody, about the Black Hills, we all know the story of the Black Hills and the Homestake mine, and that was one of the styles of mineralization occurring in veins that orogenic style that had formed very deep in the earth and had a lot of continuity. It was mined underground for actually an open pit early stage, crushing it and removing the gold, but then going underground. But we found a discovery when I was with St. Joe Minerals that actually had been a Freeport McMoran project prior, where they had focused in on a carbonate replacement, historical carbonate replacement deposit, had a lot of silver in it, a little bit of gold, and focused on that, and they drilled on that. We stepped off of that, and just through systematic work, found a breccia of an intrusive complex in the little exposure of it, oxidized, and it was mineralized. And so we started that same process of detailed mapping, sampling, and so forth, led to early stage drill campaign. And the harder you work, the luckier you are. So that's what came out of it.
Yeah, there you go. That works in every industry.
Yeah,
that works in every industry.
It works in every, crosses the boundary into every type of exploration. So, yeah.
So I got a question for you. In the Black Hills Trend, did anybody name their prospect Rocky Raccoon?
Not that I'm aware of. Nothing.
They should, don't you think?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So let me turn it around. When I asked you where the hardest place to to work was, where's the easiest place?
I don't look at any one as being easy. They all have their challenges. The most conducive, because it brings together a huge a terrain that is in Nevada. You're in the back arc in the carbonate sequences. It's with a lot of late stage intrusive associations and volcanism and so forth. So the endowment in Nevada is just in so many regions for gold is just amazing, and it has a huge history. We always think initially of the Comstock lode, in there south of Reno and near Carson City, and that was the big one to begin with. Dominantly silver, but people don't realize it produced as a byproduct, 6 or 7 million ounces of gold as well, 80, 90 million ounces of silver. But the discovery of the style of mineralization, Carlin type, because of the little whistle stop, train stop in northeastern Nevada, a little town called Carlin. Two Newmont geologists began prospecting around there, following up on work that had been done further to the east and the south, and the work the USGS had done in defining the overthrust belt. And these windows of lower limestone above the siliciclastics that had been thrusted over the top. And looking in those structural windows, two Carlin geologists went out in the early 60s to one area and to the north of Carlin, and they started prospecting around and saw these big silicified breccia zones and replacing some of the limestones. And as the story goes, sampled those and were amazed that in and around these silicic zones, the carbonate tended to be decalcified, so it was very silty. The residual silty, and had been oxidized because it had pyrite in it. Turned out it was oxide. It was gold bearing, and that was the start in Nevada.
So with regards to the mining industry, you've got these concentrations of stuff that we want. Gold, the precious metals. Today we're talking about, critical minerals and strategic minerals, but just concentrations above baseline in various different places. And then you convolve that with a set of regulations and rules and laws about how you extract that. And those rules and laws are a combination of making sure you leave the environment as clean as you can, and various other things. What is in your mind? What's the hard part? Is the hard part finding the accumulations of stuff, or being able to wend your way through a lot of these regulations and rules as they change, or as they're originally set up, as you said, in Haiti? Because when you were talking about Haiti, it reminded me of that discussion that that a lot of economists have about the resource curse. And oftentimes I keep thinking, maybe it's not a resource curse. Maybe it's the way that you actually regulate it all is a curse.
It's what I refer to as the problems of success. And I'm sure you see this in the oil and gas business as well. the regulatory environment has certainly become much more complex. It was, and I'm looking across my career. And so, being able to make a discovery is, you use the rule of thumb, and from the work that we've done on looking at early stage to discovery, it probably plays out, depending on what terrain you're in, somewhere between 1 in 1,000 to 1 to 3,000 targets or prospects, if you want to call them, early stage work, surface work. 1 in 1,000 to 1 to 3,000 become a mine. So you're looking at a lot of systematic work constantly. That's just getting you, what I would say is, onto the playing field, in the sense that going forward, then the regulatory requirements become more and more involved. Let's just take a look at how that has evolved from, say, the late 70s, early 80s, in terms of discovery to production. And you are looking, probably most of the discovery to production issues were engineering and technical logistic issues. But what has changed is that those challenges have evolved beyond just the logistics of and engineering of making it into a mine, into having to go through multiple layers of regulatory changes and requirements through a whole host of, now county, state, federal. Which agency are you dealing with in the federal, whether it's the Bureau of Land Management, or it's the U.S. Forest Service, or private, that add
DEQ,
layers.
do you guys have DEQ as well?
It adds layers, and that has become more and more consuming. And so now we're looking at something that would, a normal trajectory, you would be very, very pleased if you were looking at somewhere between 8 and 10 years, many of them 15 years. We can cite many examples of discoveries with a lot of sunk costs that are still stuck in the permitting stage in one or another.
So in that 10 to 15 years period, how much of that is engineering based, and how much of that is just approvals based?
I'm going to say it probably is a 50-50, or maybe a 60-40 in terms of permitting. And it's site specific always, as you guys can imagine, depending on the characteristics of the ore body, if it's going to be underground, if it's going to be open pit, what's the size of extraction that you're looking at, what's the size of the ore body, and so forth. But time value of money, total sunk costs, it creates a huge a challenge for getting to break even. So
what determines what type of mine it is? Like what is the difference? Like you said, ore mine, and the other one was like underground, like a tunnel, right? You're
generally grade
digging.
and where it's located. A number of deposits, may be deeper in the ground, and
Okay.
so that you can't just pre-strip the overburden to get. Let me give you a good example of one that's going on right now in Arizona. Resolution. Resolution is a porphyry style of deposit. Alan, you know what I'm talking about. It's an intrusive complex, and it sets out on a range front, actually in the valley, and it's buried, but the grades are just tremendous. It's you're looking between the porphyry and the adjoining skarn at a billion tons of close to 1.5%, 2% copper. Has some moly in it as well. The challenge is how do you extract it? Well, you go underground, and the engineering requires what they call block cave, where you're basically mining it in bulk from underground. So sunk costs are in the B's. I'm guessing probably total sunk costs for Resolution is going to be in the 12 to 15 billion. So that's even for an oil company. That's getting up there in costs. So what happened? They needed to acquire some. Even out in the flats, it was still Forest Service. They needed to acquire surface rights. So that involved an exchange of purchasing some Forest Service ground, which was actually out in the flats, no trees there, for ground out where they could do a swap, and still have to pay for the ground the Forest Service.
So you couldn't see the trees.
Exactly.
For the
So
forest.
all of that was permitted and agreed to. It required literally a congressional action to switch. So you can imagine all the delays associated with that. Finally, all of that permitting was there. Into the first Trump administration, they were ready to go, and then it was put on hold. A number of environmental groups, protested. Biden administration shut the whole thing down. They were well over close to $2 billion in sunk cost at the time.
Wow.
What does that do to your payback period when you start looking at those sort of things? And so they're now going again.
Yeah,
it's moving forward, but you look at the delays and time value of money, looking at total sunk costs and payback periods. It adds tremendous amount. So you're dealing with.
What's the total estimated?
I'm sorry.
What's the total estimated? Reserve, or what is the ultimate recovery? Look like in that deal as far as like the reserve.
Even
value.
underground is going to be close to 1 billion tons underground at very high grade copper. So, but the costs are higher because you're mining at depths of plus 1,000 feet in some cases. So,
the biggest problem is when you layer in rules and various different authorities over those rules, then it adds time, and time at the end of the day is your biggest enemy, especially when you've spent a whole lot of money up front. If you can spend money later down the road, that's fine. But the more that you have up front, and the more time that you have between the money you spend up front and your final approval to go get anything done. And I guess, I understand the reasons for
of course,
approvals
everything has a reason.
in large cases. There is a reason, but streamlining those reasons, that decision that gets made after a year of sitting on some bureaucrat's desk isn't a better decision than if it had happened a week after it had sat on a bureaucrat's desk. That's the part that is a truly solvable issue and can have massive impact on the economics of extraction of minerals that we're starting to wake up to the fact that we really, really need.
You're absolutely right, and very well said, Alan. The challenges, technical challenges, the engineering challenges are one thing, but you can have a confidence level, and you know how engineering works. It's always dealing with the confidence levels, and that you can do that at a certain cost, and eventually you get to pay back and you start making money on it, profit. The strategic value, everybody loves to say, yes, we need critical minerals. We need to bring that back home. We don't need to be importing as much, et cetera, et cetera. But it's the NIMBY, and you know what NIMBY stands for, not in my backyard issue. And to a certain degree with water rights, and everybody understands, those are serious matters. We want to make sure, wildlife and so forth. But all of that is studied. What you'll find, though, is when there's a delay, and I've seen this happen on stuff, and even in mining-friendly states like Arizona, where you're dealing with a certain agency, and because there was a long delay, then they want to go back, certain agencies want to go back and do another study to confirm what they had seen in the previous study,
Already done. Yeah.
So it
insane.
becomes, how do you manage a business under those circumstances and so forth. So it's an equal challenge to the engineering, and to the whole challenge of the discovery process itself. But
and for the people that are actually trying to find new minerals, NIMBY really stands for not in my butt, y'all.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a challenge in that sense, and so it's I've heard it said, I can't quote that as in exact terms, but if you look at a life of a mine, and we've seen the gold price rise so much now that the profit margins certainly have gotten better and better over the past few years, and I can tell you that wasn't the case, always. But the rate of return generally for a mining company, even in the gold business, is about the same as it is for a supermarket. You're looking in somewhere between the three over life, somewhere between a 3 to 6% rate of return sort of thing. So I don't know how that compares in the oil and gas business, but it's something to keep in mind. And a lot of it is because you don't see. You're looking at usually 8 to 10, 15 years out before you even can start mining and then get to payback. So that,
Once you do start mining, though, what is your typical goal when you start? The average mine. What is the average goal once you start mining for payback for that thing to pay out?
Well, you do an economic analysis that involves looking at what point you've looked at all your sunk cost and your mining costs, and your estimated profit based on a certain price, and an assumption that price is going to, you use in the case of a gold mine, you would use a static gold price, and then you would say, okay, we're producing this many ounces over the years based on what we can see, to get all of our total sunk costs paid for, and then to be able to realize a profit. How many years are we looking at based on the rate of the mining and recovery and estimated recovery, and that always changes. So,
what was the normal standard, like what you look for if you ran the economics you're hoping for?
The normal standard. I didn't mean to cut you off. It depends on the grade. It depends on the size of the ore body. It depends on a lot of engineering factors as to how the price, how efficiently you can extract the gold. If it's in oxide form, and you can do a much simpler method of just leaching using a very dilute solution of sodium cyanide, capturing the gold into solution, and then you precipitate the gold back onto either a zinc oxide mat or a carbon mat, and then you run that through a refinery, and the gold comes out as a doré. Usually has a bit of silver in it, and you're producing a gold bar. If it's in an oxide form, you can, and it's large enough, you can make a lot of money on it because you're running a lot through. As you get into the deeper portions of these ore bodies, the gold is encapsulated in sulfide minerals. You think of pyrite, and it's generally in with the associated sulfide minerals. It requires a lot more treatment and recovery. There's all kinds of issues that come up in the sulfide environment, and one is the carbon, and particularly in carbonate hosted deposits, residual carbon from oil traps that have been weakly thermally maturated to where they become a issue with recovery of the gold, because you're trying to get the gold out, and the gold is attracted to the carbon, and so you get this residual carbon in the ore bodies in the deeper zones, and it becomes very difficult. It goes through a much more deleterious extractive process for
black gold.
Right? It really is, and if the carbon is
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
To kind of pull back and take a bigger picture look. Like China allows Western companies to go in and mine in China, but only in deposits that are extraordinarily difficult to leach, to extract minerals, the valuable minerals from, because they want to learn those extraction techniques.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely true.
And so, what do we need to do in the free world or in the Western world to be on the forefront of extraction and continue to be on the forefront of extraction technologies?
I think that that's become more of a private endeavor rather than a governmental endeavor, where there's been a lot of governmental research in the past. I tell you about the U.S. Bureau of Mines, who really developed the cyanide leach process themselves. The Bureau of Mines was shut down, in the early '80s, mid '80s, something in that. So we don't have that basic research. Companies have taken over that process of doing the research. I think it has to be more of a joint effort again, where
So the Bureau of Mines used to serve as kind of a Department of Energy in terms of making sure that there was research dollars going to various different things that were of interest, and we lost that. We don't have that coordinating body anymore to
be a
basically fund
clearinghouse,
these
you
things
know,
at a
to allow you to
university.
do that. Now, a lot of that has been taken over by you know, industry and research with industry. Some fabulous, fantastic metallurgical recovery technologies have come out of that, you know, including pressure oxidation, or you know, the sulfides are basically put into an autoclave, and at a high, you know, at high temperature, they're oxidized, and you recreate the oxidations under a concentrated environment, and then you can leach the gold out. Another one is roasting, where they grind them to a really super fine mesh, run it over, and it's like a popcorn machine sort of thing. Hot air, it oxidizes, and then you can recover the gold out of it. So those sort of things.
So it seems to me like, you know, Nevada or any place that's really interested in or that has a mining background, you know, this seems like there's an opportunity for there to, you know, we used to be interested in our in terms of identifying what our resources were. The USGS, like you said, the Bureau of Mines, they were always focused on resources and development of resources. And it seems like technology on this case right over here has a huge amount to do with regards to what resources we might have available to us. And clearly, I mean, we're finding ourselves in terms of strategic minerals behind the eight ball because we don't have the refining technology in-house that China has developed with regards to certain of strategic minerals. Where should we be interested? You know, I'm not typically a guy who spouses for more or bigger government, but should there be somewhere in the federal government a place where we're interested in those resources and how we extract those and help industry along with regards to best practices in extracting them? How do we get ahead of the game instead of playing catch up?
So that's excellent question. Excellent question. There are, you know, the backups. Loss of the Bureau of Mines didn't mean that resource and critical resource documentation and understanding went away. The USGS basically took over that role. They had their own, but I mean, they basically have taken over that role completely. And in terms of research, DOE has now stepped into the foray with the critical minerals. However you want to define critical minerals, and have, especially under Doug Burgum, have been much more open to research on metallurgical extraction techniques and so forth. So that's happening. But when did we flip that switch back on, Alan? A year and a half ago, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of these things that has not had a consistency, and it's, you know, that sort of thing takes time. In terms of resource opportunities, I'm not as concerned as the press wants to make out. Oh my gosh, you know, we need to have Greenland sort of thing. You know, it'd be nice to have Greenland, some kind of an agreement with them on a number of their critical minerals opportunities. But that can be done. I think those kind of things can be worked through. I'm not concerned. I've seen in too many instances that the free market more than makes up with being able to make discoveries and move things on. In terms of some of them, it's just a matter of moving them forward and getting the permitting. Lithium, for instance. You look at the lithium holdings in Nevada. It's some of the largest in the world in northern Nevada and around McDermott. And
Yeah, I think the more that you learn about minerals in terms of where they're located, you start to realize that there's a lot of resource available to us. It's just getting it from resource to the usable element over, the usable thing that
exactly.
we need. And then the parts that are technical, which I have ultimate confidence in humans' abilities to solve technical problems.
Absolutely. Well put.
What I have less confidence in is humans to solve bureaucracy problems.
The political-based challenges, in my view, well outweigh the abilities to be successful in that realm, in that domain, and so forth. And coming back to the regional geology, if you look and you step inboard into the continent, into the western U.S., and you're getting a lot more of the Sialic intrusive complexes coming up, the volcanism associated with the far back arc. You're picking up these strategic metals, lithium being one of them, beryllium. Nobody thinks of the beryllium deposits and the resources in western Utah, but all these strategic light rare earth minerals, light metal rare earth minerals. It's not a question of endowment. It's a question of focus on moving those sort of opportunities and going and exploring for those and building up an understanding. So I'm not concerned about that. It's more exactly what you talk is the challenge of coming up to speed with the processing and metallurgical extraction, which the Chinese have a jump on us. Interesting story on that. Where's their sources coming from? Well, it's in Africa. What they're doing is they're making a concentrate and then taking the concentrate back to China and refining it. So a lot of those concessions that they acquired in the 80s and 90s were Freeport-McMoRan had a number of them, and at the time, and just didn't hold on to them. So it's to me, it's the opportunity in that regard is not as nearly the concern as just building up an environment and a culture that allows for success. And so I use that in. And I know when you nod your head, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to build the culture for success, the integration of minds and purpose and outcomes that allow for that. And that starts by making sure everybody's rowing in the same direction.
Is there a data hub like Drilling Info? Obviously, Alan's creation. Is there a Drilling Info for the mineral for the mining mineral side of the business that you guys go to?
Yeah, okay. That's moving. I mean, that's moving at lightning speed as we add AI to that process. It's not as well refined and is not as well documented because. Unlike oil and gas, that you eventually have to report this whether you keep the concession or the license or not. And minerals, a lot of that is held in. Well, let's take the example, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Alan, is the Anaconda Files. how much of that was public domain information? It just you go back to that.
Well,
makes sense.
there is that filing system, and I'm not sure if it's connected or what, but it has to do with when you basically when you're trying to securitize a prospect or something like that. There's a filing requirement.
Oh yeah, the 43101 regulations in Canada, which have
Yes, would you
become
talk about
very,
that a little
very
bit?
powerful internationally. And that's the standard, because now all that information has to be filed. When you drill, if you're a Canadian company and you're drilling in Nevada, you have to file, the 43101 updates, status reports, resource estimates, preliminary economic assessments, economic assessment reports, and so forth. So you're right. That culture is building and building and building. In the private domain, there are a number of companies working in that direction now. Certainly not as advanced. I mean, again, that's minerals. It's generally in those kind of technologies, 15 years behind oil and gas.
So are you excited about seeing like the advent on TV of like a bunch of guys taking over some old claims and trying to go underground and extract? I mean, that scares me a little bit. But those guys going out in the Bering Strait and sucking it all out with the hoses on the bottom. I have to say the reason I like it is because when you actually have a grassroots movement of thousands of people going out and trying to do something right over there, it helps popularize what an industry might be. I think that the very best thing that ever happened to the oil and gas industry in the United States was the fact that there were 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000 operators and a few very big guys. That all of a sudden you had all these mom and pops, and so you couldn't really just throw the baby out with the bathwater when you're sitting there getting angry at big oil. And small mining, a popularized small mining, can that do the same thing for mining in general?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think it's a give and take. The one side is everybody likes to see somebody that has gone out and literally by their bootstraps, it's able to mine a placer claim, and you see a lot of that still, even in the States, not just Alaska, but Montana saw a lot of that. And that's good because it shows that the mining law of 1872 that allowed an individual to go out and stake a claim, whether it was a lode claim or a placer claim, and the right to work that. So that culture, I agree with, within bounds. Where it crosses the line is where you get into illegal mining and destruction, and it creates the image of, and it gets thrown back on all of us. And so, in the mining industry, we talk about three types of mining. We talk about historical mining that was done, and you go back into old districts and so forth, and you see what the disturbance was because there was no real understanding of consequences. That wasn't something that was in the mindset. Mm-hmm. And we all look at it and see. I've shaken my head and said, "How? Why? And did they do that?" Second is now modern mining, which involves all the regulations and so forth and reclamation. But the third one, and especially in an international environment, is illegal mining. And whether it's the garimperos in Peru or the pork knockers in Suriname, or the garimperos, the illegales in Peru, or the garimperos in Brazil, they they become much more sophisticated. They create a tremendous can create a tremendous surface destruction, and it reflects on everybody, and it's outside of the law, and it creates lots of problems. So
those are the blood diamonds of it's the concept of blood diamond applied to gold and to minerals
exactly.
in general, huh?
And so not only are you seeing it in gold, but more recently with these small oxide caps in copper, that the illegals will come in on a claim and then begin mining that and leaching it with acid, to get a raw doré of copper. So those sort of things, or selling it, to where it can go directly to a plant and they get a little bit of profit underneath. So, because nobody at the plant really, is going to ask questions about where they're getting, 5% oxide copper from. So all of those things work both ways.
And I think that's happening in LA too, in illegal mining of their electric systems and things like that.
Well, it creates some real challenges for legal mining, and I've seen it in a number of countries where you're competing against them. And so you have to take a look at that situation and ask yourself, what are the trade-offs, on how to handle it.
So Lewis, I've got how about a couple
Sure.
more questions? So you worked all over the world. Where are the places you'd be watching right now that most people aren't paying attention to?
In respect to opportunities,
Mining, opportunities, and resources that could come unstuck and become big.
I mean, speaking off the top of my head, and given the setting in Greenland, I think you're going to see a big move in Greenland, only because of the setting and the lack of exploration. So I see that one as a big one. Alaska still as another one. You're looking for copper. I think the Andean belt still has lots of potential. We're going to see a number of things in Peru that will still come online, given the copper price. Underexplored terrain. Northern Argentina comes to mind. If they can get their act together, Colombia. Still seeing it in the Mexican gold belts, and some of these more alkalic systems inboard in northern and central Mexico. I was amazed by the endowment in Sweden. A lot of systematic work and a lot of things that still remain under shallow cover from the receding glaciers, where you got a colluvium on glacial till on top, and so a number of buried deposits. Looking at these orogenic systems are all some of the things that come to mind in those belts. I could start naming off more and more and more, but interesting point. A lot of people ask me, and you probably have heard a little bit about the same kind of questions, and they're well-intended questions. And I'll just phrase it the way I've heard it at least 100 times in my career. When are we going to run out of gold? And my response is, well, what price are you talking about? Are we talking about $35 gold? Are we talking about $150? Even $500 gold? There may be a little bit of that left. Oh, not much. Tell me what price, and I'll tell you where how, what the gold endowment would look like that can be mined. So
That's the same conversation in oil and gas. It's when you have, there's rock out there that can produce plenty of oil, but at what
yeah,
price
so it's
it's not,
price dependent,
it's
and that's something
yeah.
that people don't, because things get recycled. I can list off a number of things that became big discoveries that somebody else had discovered quite some time ago, and the junior come back in and they make a big thing of it because they want to get the stock price up. But yeah, it was at you know when gold was at 250 rather than at 5,000. So it's all price dependent. That's why I say, we
Are you
look at
bullish
our
or
the metal endowment that we have in the United States, and the kind of metals opportunities, including and these what they've called critical minerals, which I think is now up to about 45 or 50. So it's like they have copper on it as well now. Um, it's just a price. What's the price?
are you bullish or bearish on oil? Or, I mean, oil. That's too common on the gold price. The future market of obviously the future of
Well,
gold
I'll
price.
tell you the same story about the gold price. There are two currencies in the world. What are those two currencies? The dollar and
Dollar
gold.
and the
Gold.
So if you want to see the value of the gold and in terms of the price, one is always estimated in terms of the other, right? How many ounces? How much does it cost to buy a certain amount of ounces of gold, or how many dollars does that ounce carry? And if you want to understand the gold price, just look at the value of the dollar. I think I have a chart of that. I'd be glad to send it to you. And it just shows,
Oh
as
yeah.
you look at the price of gold and the U.S. debt, and they follow each other perfectly. They're perfectly aligned. So, what are we going to do with
And I
our
think
debt?
even the original design behind Bitcoin
Yeah.
was designed to reflect the amount of energy it required, a cost essentially required, to mine an ounce of gold.
I believe that. I believe
Yeah.
that sincerely because that's the only way you can link the valuation of something like Bitcoin to something that is real. So I guess saying that is the best way to look at it. The gold price is always going to follow the dollar, and I've seen it for 40 years in my career.
Well, we can make sure, and Robbie can, our producer here can, if you can send that over, we can either include this in the show, and maybe put it in the notes when people look at it. So that'd be pretty cool. I'd love to see it myself.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people would. But for me, this is great to learn a lot about something I don't know a lot about. I've looked at some prospects in gold and done a little dabbling in it on the gold side. Not any of the other minerals, and we've talked to a few people about it. So it's really fascinating to learn from obviously from your level, which is the where it all starts, right? So I really appreciate that. One question I had that I wrote down before I got here, I have to ask, especially now knowing the gravity of your relationship with Alan. I really would like to know, what green, fresh out of school, Alan was, what he was like as someone, obviously as an employee, as somebody who worked under you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
No, I mean, Alan was literally one of the most talented young geologists that I had worked with. And, you know, I had a good working relationship with his professor, Kenneth Clark at Texas El Paso, where he'd done a lot of consulting work for companies that I'd worked with, and I brought him on, and we had this opportunity up in Montana And I said, "You got somebody that?" And I told him what I needed in terms of an assistant, and he'd given me other students that had worked out very well. And without even blinking an eye, he said, "I have one exactly for you. His name is Alan Gilmer. He's going to be graduating and so forth." And sure enough, Alan held all of that. He did a tremendous job. He came to me one day and said, I got this opportunity, and I believe it was with Superior. Is that right, Alan? Marathon, excuse me. And
Yeah.
he says, can I just ask your opinion or your advice? And I said, yeah, absolutely, go for it. It's a great opportunity, and you'll do well. Because his background came from economic geology. He did his thesis on a deposit in Mexico and did it. I mean, for Kenneth Clark to tell me it was one of the best thesis that students that he'd ever had, that says a lot. And so I knew that he would be successful in any endeavor, and he has been. So,
Yeah, that's
Well, to kind of flesh out that story was, I went to talk to Lewis about it because mining, being a mining geologist is maybe one of the most fun things you can do in life, and it becomes a passion for people. And I asked Lewis, I said, I have this opportunity, and Lewis looked at me in the eye and he said, being a mining geologist is a privilege. It's one of the funnest things you can do in life. He said, but if you ever want to have a family, wife and kids, it comes at a big cost. And he said you have to weigh it against that. He said, I don't know a single mining geologist that doesn't have broken family in the past, because the time it requires and the dedication. You got to be away for months and months, living in jungles and going and doing these things, and eventually your wife or your husband was going to just get sick and tired of it, and it was a moment of truth, and it took me a little bit to try to figure all of that out. But I have to say that a big part of Lewis Teal survived in all the companies that I helped start, because I think the way that Lewis ran things, the way that he inspired people, just there was an esprit de corps around any of Lewis's teams that I'd never seen before, and there's very rarely after. And I've tried to emulate that everywhere I've gone.
yeah. What a great
I'll
story
leave
of
it
leadership and
with
inspiration and all that.
two quotes, just to amplify what Alan is talking about, Cody. One I heard from an old boss, and it was something to the effect of, "Why do people put on baggy white pants and long red coats?" And I said, "I don't know. It's not to catch the fox. It's the thrill of the chase." And you have to understand that. The other is a quote that I read, the poems of Robert Service. You may know who Robert Service is. Robert Service is the great Canadian poet. He's spent a lot of time in the Canadian and Alaskan gold rushes in the turn of the century, and beyond. But he talks about that in one of his poems. And the line goes like this: "There is gold, and it's hunting and haunting. It's driving me on as of old. But it isn't the gold that I'm wanting so much as just finding the gold. And believe me, in exploration, there's nothing a sure statement ever said. That's what, it gets into your blood, and the pattern recognition takes hold. And, just about the time it's the 30 days of perspiration and the 1 day of inspiration, and that thrill of the chase gets into you. And, then then on to the next one, sort of thing. So the thrill of discovery is as an incredible sensation as anything else. But it's always the eye of the drill bit.
Go ahead.
The last one I'll leave you with is in exploration, the eye of the drill bit is the only reality. And at times, it does make fools of us all.
Yes. So, Lewis, just in leaving, why don't you tell us all how to get hold of you and your wife's consulting business, what you guys are focusing on. I will tell you that anybody who's interested in investing in oil and gas or investing in gold, junior companies, or if somebody's coming to them with opportunities to invest in gold mines, your first call should be Lewis. So why don't you
we'll be glad to.
Let us know how to get in touch with you.
No, not a problem. We'll do that. Okay?
Great. So one last question is, have you seen that TV show? I think it might be on Fox, and it's about those brothers in Montana that have gone into this old mining district and these old mines, and the mines themselves are in horrific condition. I mean, I think they were last mined in the, late 1800s, and they keep trying to. Their granddad had been told by this one guy that owned the mine that that he had discovered this whole, this great gold hoard that he dynamited it shut because he didn't want his partner to know about it, and then he died, and so these guys are going in there trying to find this whole thing, and I'm sitting there going, man, the over/under is, are they going to die in a mine? All these brothers going to die in a huge mine collapse, or are they going to actually find anything and be able to extract anything before the whole thing caves in on them?
That's a great story. I mean, it's a parallel to the old the Superstition Mountains, and the same thing. The superstitions right outside of Arizona, where, the superstition is that exactly the same thing. There was a high-grade mine, with native gold in the veins, and on and on and on, and they dynamited it shut, and nobody's ever been able to find it since, sort of thing. And so, I think it's one of those allures that it just gets into the human blood, and it's in, whether it's the pork knockers in Suriname, the garimperos in Brazil, the ilegales in Central South America, Mexico, the same thing in the States, in Alaska and so forth. It just comes down to it's that allure that just gets into the spirit, and
the thrill of discovery.
And it comes back in those forms, I think. So it does.
And I think the microbiologist is looking for a cure for something. I mean, whenever I'm sure it's the same feel.
It is exactly the same thrill of the chase, and that's why I refer to it as the thrill of the chase. I think the analogy with, the fox hunt, why these guys dress in funny uniforms, and let the dogs out and chase them, and with horses is the same sort of crazy appeal, but it gets into your heart, into your blood. So, yeah,
Well, Lewis, I sure want to thank you
absolutely.
for taking the time out
Yeah.
to talk to us. This has been a
Okay,
lot of
I'm
fun.
glad that it has been. I'm glad, and
Yeah.
I hope you've learned a little bit. And yeah, it's been a good time for me as well.
Well, I've learned a lot, not knowing much less than you two. I mean, I learned a lot, and it's awesome to know that one of the reasons Alan's sitting here, and one of the reasons Alan's been successful, is he had such great leadership. Going back to his first job, someone who was honest with him and selfless. So that's the oil and gas industry thanks you for that, for sure. And that's probably the most important thing. But yeah, this was extremely educational for me and exciting, and so it's sparked an interest I didn't have in minerals before.
So I will
appreciate it.
leave you with one opportunity to further kind of go in this direction, but and I certainly can contact him, but in the gold royalty business, because the royalties move into the oil and gas sector as well. A colleague of mine that I work with at Newmont and formed his own junior, David Cole, with EMX, been tremendously successful. EMX is now merged with Elemental. He's the CEO for Elemental, which is a worldwide gold royalty. Well, not just gold, but copper and other base metals. He has a tremendous story to tell on the business side, particularly as it relates to the what he refers to as the prospector generator model, where they've gone in and they've staked ground, picked up ground early on, and then other companies have come in to work them. They found some themselves, but they come in and work them, and they retain a royalty. And he's built a tremendous business using that business model. So you'd send me a text or an email if you think you're interested, and I could always get in touch with Dave if you guys want to do another sector on the in the mineral side of things.
Well, if you want to think about it, I mean, Cody here is part of one of the companies in Rivery Capital is Oil and Gas Royalty Clearinghouse, and it is it has been a place for people to buy and sell mineral interests, working interests, royalty interests, overrides, things like that in the oil and gas sector. And and I would imagine that within their investor base, there's plenty of people would be interested in looking at precious metal royalties as well.
Yeah, I mean that'd be interesting. I didn't, it's very interesting. I mean, I think a lot of the things would work similarly. I'm sure there's, the minerals just like any other royalty, has a deed, and it's probably very similar title wise. So I think that would be even if we're off air on that, I think that would be extremely interesting to see. If you could sell, I mean, right now it'd probably be a hot commodity to sell gold royalties, or to have, find ways to market them. I mean, we have a marketplace for oil and gas royalties. Why? I mean, you could also do mining royalties, including coal. You talk about coal, gold, all these major minerals and commodities. I mean, they all go together. So, yeah, I didn't. That's a great idea.
At any rate, if you're interested, I'll be glad to make the contacts for you guys, and you can decide whether or not you want to follow through on it. It's just a different sector of the business that has become more and more becoming more and more dominant in the particularly in the early exploration stages for not just precious metals, but base metals and copper and strategic metals as well. But different business model.
Is there a marketplace? Is there a marketplace for the small and mid market? Is there a marketplace for I mean, both the claims and the royalties and all that? Is there somewhere you go, or like, hey, I want to buy one? Is there a place you go that's like a centralized clearinghouse like we have?
I think what's happening right now is these guys are coming in they're small publics, right? They're small. They're publicly traded in the Toronto, Vancouver Exchange or Toronto Exchange, and that's the way that they monetize the future value of the royalties.
But what about like a marketplace where you sell the royalties, like a clearinghouse? I mean,
That's a good question, and the person that could answer that would be a David Cole.
Okay.
Because he fits into that category, and he knows that business quite well. But it would be somebody, if you're interested in looking at that angle of and that dimension of the business, which is becoming more and larger in particularly precious metals, he would be the one to focus on that. So I'll be glad to, if you guys want to go forward with that. I can give you his contact information, and be an intermediary, so he knows, what you're interested in doing. So, all right, you got it.
Thanks a lot, Lewis.
All the best to you, Alan. We'll see you when you get to Albuquerque.
Absolutely, I have to get another Mexican food fit here.
I'll take you up on it.
Alrighty.
All right, man.
That place we went to last time was great. I love that.
Oh
courtyard
yeah.
out there.
No, the El Pinto is it's just part of the Albuquerque history. Cody, if you haven't been there, that's the place to go. It's quite the restaurant. So
I'm gonna write it down. My cousin still lives out there.
Okay.
So El Pinto. You never heard of a Joel Davis there, right? A politician /
No, I have not. I'm sorry to say.
Joel Davis. Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably good.
All right.
He's a little liberal.
Well, listen, you guys have a great one. Good catching up with you. Good meeting you, Cody, and all the best to you. Work safely, travel safely, and hopefully we'll talk soon then.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Crude Awakenings. A huge thank you to Lewis Teal for taking the time to share 4 decades of hard-won experience with us. If you enjoyed this one, do us a favor. Subscribe wherever you listen, leave a review, and share it with someone who'd like it. We'll see you next time on Crude Awakenings. Produced by Rivery Marketing Group, a subsidiary of Rivery Capital.